6.4 million years ago, long before the word history was ever whispered, before ink had met stone, before man had called himself man, a child was born in the unforgiving heat of what would one day be called Africa, under a twisted fig tree clinging to a cliff of rock and memory, its gnarled branches like the outstretched fingers of time itself. The dawn was slow that morning, as if the sun hesitated before pulling itself over the thorn-ridden horizon. The sky burned orange-red, not with beauty, but with an ancient ache, because this land, the dry and cracking skin of the earth, had seen too many beginnings and too many endings to count. In the Valley of Thorns, where death always came before birth, and silence weighed heavier than time, a lone figure lay crouched in labor, her limbs trembling, her hair matted with dust, her eyes darting to every sound in the wilderness. She was no human as we know them, but something earlier, something smaller, a mother from the lineage of Sahelanthropus tuchadensis, a creature that walked not entirely on all fours, but not yet proudly upright, a silent pioneer of what we would one day become. Her breathing was ragged, pulled between pain and fear, as nearby the sounds of danger whispered through the tall grass. The low, near-invisible rustling of something hungry, watching. Her mate stood a short distance away, stick in hand, still and silent, his ears twitching like the leaves above them. The tribe had scattered with the oncoming scent of predator, most likely a great cat, unseen, but always close, and only the bond between two creatures, forged not by words but by instinct, had kept him at her side. She bore down, grunted, and the earth seemed to lean in, listening. The air grew heavier, thicker, the wind curling around her like smoke. Then it came, a sound that would never be recorded, never echoed, yet somehow eternal. A cry, not the chuichanine, Ildes, but the mother's, sharp, low, primal. And then silence. For one breathless moment, the world paused. Even the vultures circling high above seemed to slow. And then, beneath the shadow of the fig tree, wrapped in blood and warmth and the dirt of 100 ancestors, a newborn cried, weak, shrill, uncertain, but alive. That cry did not travel far. It did not change the wind, nor shift the grass, but it cracked something deeper. For in that moment, evolution had moved forward, not by inches, but by a breath. The mother clutched the child close, her long fingers trembling against the slick skin, her chest heaving, her face pressed to the child's crown as if willing her heartbeat into it. Her mate crept forward, slow, reverent, his eyes not filled with joy, but something stranger, recognition. They could not name it, but both knew something in this birth was different. The child, small even by ancient standards, blinked open her eyes, faster than expected. Her gaze, unfocused, still held a strange steadiness. Let's call her Aru. Not because she had a name, but because even the unnamed deserved to be remembered. Aru had no language, no cry of selfhood, but her fingers gripped the air with a strength that startled her mother. Her limbs, long and wiry, twitched with a strange energy. She was born with a pelvis slightly wider than usual, a head slightly more rounded, eyes placed just a bit differently, insignificant details to the present, but future changing in their accumulation. Aru was not evolution's masterpiece, but its suggestion, a whisper of what could be, if fate allowed. And fate, cruel and patient, rarely allowed anything. All around them, the world did not pause to honor her. The grasses still swayed. The sky still darkened with approaching clouds. Life moved forward with its usual indifference. Yet within that fig tree's shadow, something ancient stirred. Not a not a spirit, but the memory of the earth itself, as if the planet, weary and wounded, noticed. Because this was not the first child, and not the last. But this one would live, and that alone was rare. The vultures, still circling, did not see legacy. They saw weakness, meat, a delay in the mother's mobility, a risk. But something else watched too, something not alive, not dead, not divine. The creeping force of time. And time, ever hungry, saw Aru as a seed, a possibility. As the mother nestled her against her chest, her own eyes heavy with exhaustion, her mate crouched nearby, one eye on the tree line, one on the future he could not name. That night, under the dense, starless dark, they did not sleep. The cries of hyenas echoed, the wind shrieked through the broken grass. But Aru did not die. Her chest rose and fell, her tiny hands twitched, and with every heartbeat, something old was rewritten. That breath was not just survival, it was a challenge. To predators, to drought, to extinction itself. And in the deep silence between howls and wind, that child's quiet breathing rewrote the laws of her lineage. Her mother, unable to know what had changed, nevertheless felt it. She did not move for hours. Her heartbeat slowed to match the child's. Her mate, keeping watch with his dull spear and ancient fear, did not blink for what felt like an age. Morning came slowly. Pale light filtered over the hills. Somewhere in the distance, the rest of the tribe had waited out the night. They returned, one by one, cautious, silent, sniffing the air for loss or birth. When they saw the child, they did not smile. Smiling had not yet been invented. But they circled her slowly, curious. One of the older females knelt and touched her hair, a coarse gesture, neither gentle nor harsh. Aru blinked up at her, then reached. The hand did not land, but it moved toward. That movement alone was enough. That was connection. That was the beginning of choice. And the old female grunted softly, a sigh, on that would one day become yes. In that moment, with no witnesses, no language, no fire, the tribe had accepted the future, not knowingly, but willingly. And as the sky began to clear, and birds screamed overhead, and the fig tree dropped its first spoiled fruit, Aru fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Her fingers curled, her chest rising slow and even. No stories would be told of her, no drawings on cave walls, no bones found in sediment, but none of that mattered. For she had taken the first breath, and that was enough. Days passed, like breathless steps over hot stone, each one etched in dust and silence, each one carrying with it a weight heavier than any seen burden. For in those days, Aru lived, and in her survival, the rhythm of the world shifted again, slightly, but irreversibly, though no creature knew it, and no eye could measure it. The tribe moved slowly now, burdened not by possessions, they had none, but by consequence, by the invisible string that tied them to this small, fragile being who had no name, but had already altered the invisible compass of the group. Aru's cries were too loud for the silence of the savannah, too frequent to go unnoticed by the night hunters who moved like shadows in tall grass. But her mother, ever watchful, ever worn, would not let her go. Her arms ached from days of carrying, her back bent more than usual, her instincts torn between the urgency of survival and the depthless ache of a bond she could not name. For love had no word, no recognition, but it lived, raw and wordless, in her marrow. She wrapped Aru in a sling of dried reeds and softened hide, pressed her tightly to her chest, where the rhythm of her own heart beat like a slow, protective drum. And when the sun rose high and cruel, she soaked broad leaves in muddy water, laid them gently over her child's skin to cool the burning heat that threatened to steal breath from lungs still new. Around them, the tribe grew restless. A child's cries were an invitation to death. Saber-tooths did not announce themselves. Eagles watched from far above. Snakes moved soundlessly. Every sound Aru made was a risk, a flare in the dark of prehistory, a candle in a house of dry straw. And yet, no one turned away. The elders, crag-faced and twitching with instinct, often watched her from the edges of their gatherings, heads tilted, not in curiosity, but in something closer to unease, as if they sensed a ripple, but could not tell whether it came from predator or omen. The younger ones kept their distance but stole glances, while the males carried the weight of food, defense, and uncertainty on their narrow shoulders. Then came the storm. One evening, as the sun melted behind blackening hills, the air thickened and slowed, and the winds that whispered across the plains began to howl with unfamiliar voices. Lightning crawled across the sky, like veins of the dying gods, and thunder cracked open the belly of the clouds. The tribe, sensing doom in the pressure change, hurried into the fold of a low cave, shallow but dry, its walls jagged and dark like broken teeth. The wind roared, bending the grasses sideways, lifting dust into the air like smoke, and the rain followed, first in drops like pebbles, then in sheets that beat against the earth like war drums. Inside that cave, huddled together not in warmth, but in fear, they waited. And in that silence, punctuated only by the tremors of the world outside, something happened that would go unseen by all but the shadows. Aru, nestled against her mother's skin, opened her mouth, not in need, not in pain, but in mimicry. She had heard the low grunt of her mother. That soft rumble of reassurance meant not for others, but for herself. And now, somehow, impossibly, Aru returned it. Not perfectly, not deliberately, but with intent. Her tiny lungs expelled air in a sound that, while crude, held a rhythm. It was not a cry. It was not a demand. It was a response. And that changed everything. The mother froze, her hand hovering mid-motion, her eyes widening slightly. The others did not notice at first, but then a female, older, her spine crooked, her face deep lined with experience and ancient wounds, leaned closer. Aru looked at her, eyes still soft and unfinished, and again made that sound. The old one responded, a grunt of surprise or maybe recognition. Ion, and the spark caught. Aru, hearing that new sound, responded again, different this time, as if each breath she shaped was an attempt to speak in a language no one had ever heard, because no one had ever made it. There was no fire in that cave, no flames to cast warmth or stories, but something more powerful burned there, the recognition of intention. That night, under a ceiling of dripping stone and roaring sky, the tribe circled closer. Not as protection, but as audience. Aru's mother, exhausted beyond exhaustion, allowed herself to sleep for the first time in what felt like cycles. The others took turns watching, not the child. There had been children before, but the sounds, the mimicking, the spark of something. Some thought it was spirit, others, threat. None could name it. And in that flickering, shifting dark, the shadows thrown by lightning onto the walls looked like movement, figures, gestures, echoes of a story that had not yet been written, but was somehow being told. Aru, unaware of what she had done, slipped into her own sleep, and in her dreams, if she could dream, were flashes of motion, sound, color. The warmth of a hand, the beat of the heart beneath her, the curve of a grunt shaped not in need, but in thought. For that's what this was, the birth of thought. Or maybe, the prelude. In the days that followed, the mimicry continued. Her sounds changed. Some were rhythmic, some mirrored others, some made no sense. But to the tribe, those sounds became familiar. A pattern, an echo. Aru became not just a burden, but an anchor. She became the center around which the small circle formed. When they rested, someone was always near. When they walked, someone always glanced back. And the mother, though she did not speak, began to hum softly to Aru. Not a song, for songs had not yet come, but a rhythm, a familiarity. Aru responded to that rhythm. She quieted when it played. She wriggled when it changed. Even the elders began to murmur in low tones when she passed. Something about her was not normal. Something about her refused to die. And in that refusal was the seed of a future. They did not understand evolution, but they felt something bending. Time, perhaps, or fate, or just the fragile shape of possibility. The cave became their base. It was dry. It was hidden. It was safe, mostly. Here, stories were not told, but felt. Here, in the markings on the stone, scratches made by claws or stone, some of the younger ones began to mimic as well. Not language, but repetition. They scratched too. They made marks, not for use, but for rhythm. They tapped small stones together. They made sounds for reasons they didn't know. And Aru, at the center of it, grew. Slowly, but strong. Her eyes opened wide now. She could hold her mother's finger. She responded to tone. And sometimes, when the storm rolled again and the lightning screamed, Aru did not cry. She watched. That, above all else, changed them. The tribe became quieter, not out of fear, but listening. They began to wait, to observe, to mimic, not just Aru, but each other. Silence became less about safety and more about attention. And though no one knew it, a new kind of fire had caught. A fire that had no flame. The kind that would burn not wood, but the mind. In time, Aru's sounds became cues. If she cried sharply, it meant fear. If she hummed low, it meant contentment. Her tribe adjusted. They responded, not in understanding, but in rhythm. Her mother, once merely a guardian, became a conduit. Her protection grew fierce. Her face changed. She was no longer just a bearer of life. She was the mother of something greater. And though her back bent further, and her steps slowed, she walked with pride. Her mate, once distant, began to groom her more. They formed a trio, her, Aru, and him, and together they led in a quiet way, not in dominance, but in presence. The others followed because they felt something right, not because they feared something strong, and that, too, was new. One day, the oldest, male, half-blind and toothless, began to hum to himself as he picked at a piece of bark, a rhythm. It matched the one Aru had made days earlier. He didn't know why he did it, but the others joined, not in song, but in sound, in beat, a rhythm around a child. That, perhaps, was the first ceremony, and it was not made for gods. It was made for a girl who had lived. She would not grow to adulthood. The world was too cruel, disease too near, famine always hunting. But she had lived long enough to shift the tide. And in that cave, lit not by flame but by sound and shadow, her tribe remembered her, not with names, not with markers, but with mimicry, with rhythm, with change. That was enough.